Peter King joined us a short time ago, and once again, another sentence that had Brock Purdy and Joe Montana in it together. I know it makes people uncomfortable, but Brian Baldinger was on the morning roast and said this.
Well, obviously, the best that ever did it right there, Joe Montana, he had that. You couldn't rattle him. And I feel like he's got, I'm not comparing him to Joe Montana.
No.
I'm not doing anything like that. But he does have that composure. He does have that poise. And, you see it, Joe, but the people that see it first, if you do rattle guy, is the defensive players. Mm. They see it and feel it first. They see it before anybody else. And they'll talk about it on the sidelines. I know certain defensive players, great players, they know when they got their quarterback. They know when the game is in the bag because of what they're doing to the quarterback. I never get the feeling, no matter what, how many shots he takes or a missed throw, whatever, that you ever have that guy. That's a dangerous composition if you're trying to defend it.
Would love to hear from some of you on this. 888-957-9570. Again, but what is maybe the next 95-7 the game, the shop slogan. But what, said Peter King about Brock Purdy. In other words, well, he's good, but his completion percentage is high, but I know he doesn't turn the ball over, but I know he's won every game he's played, but, and Peter said, but what?
But what? Yes.
So the column that Peter wrote yesterday, and you pointed this out, the exact quote is this. It's amazing to me after he begins his career 11-0 in games he's played at least 3 quarters, that there is this universal asterisk on his competence, talking about Brock Purdy. More ridiculous than amazing, really.
Yes.
That's from Peter King.
And that's, everybody wants to put it into a certain sort of a box. And I don't take issue with what Baldy said, but we all need to stop in terms of, I'm not trying to compare him to Joe Montana, and then we all compare him to Joe Montana. And it's okay to compare him to Joe Montana. You're not saying he's as good as Joe Montana. He's not as accomplished as Joe Montana, but there can be things that Joe Montana was good at that Brock Purdy is also good at. So I think all of us need to stop in terms of, I'm not trying to compare him to Joe Montana because we are. He's a Niner quarterback. Joe is a Niner quarterback. Brock Purdy is undefeated in games he starts and finishes, and that's actually better than what Joe Montana did in games that he started and finished at the start of his career. There are things that they share in common, and it's okay to point that out. We don't have to all run from it and try to make sure everybody knows that we're not saying that Brock Purdy is as good as Joe Montana. Of course he's not at this point. Now, it'd be kind of cool if he wound up as successful as Joe. If Brock Purdy wins 3 Super Bowls,
that'd be incredible.
Wouldn't that be cool?
That would be fine.
So
I'll take it.
Right. But right now, it's okay to compare him in terms of lightly drafted, really smart, not physically overpowering, and pretty precise with the football.
I think the Montana comparison is there's something physical about the build that looks similar. And the movement. Joe Montana was not a running quarterback, but his movement around the field, his mobility was strong. I think Brock sometimes looks like the same build, the same movement, the same sort of decision-making, the presence on the field. There's a look that Joe Montana had that Brock shares. So that's a fair comparison. Certainly no one's talking about any sort of a career arc with Brock Purdy, but I am mindful of these 2 comparisons. I think most people, if you said, okay, best quarterbacks of all time, give me your top 5. I think for most people, just based on accomplishment, the first 2 names out the mouth are Tom Brady and Joe Montana.
Correct.
For most people.
Then you can go to your Peyton Mannings, your John Elways, your Dan Marinos, if you were so inclined.
All of the number 1 overall draft pick guys, right?
Sure.
But Brady and Montana, what do they share? They were not first rounders.
Right.
They were not second rounders. They have tons of rings, tons of success. And so, look, maybe it's just we're going to have to get used to it being a longer road than we want to. But I'd love to know that from anybody who wants to talk Niner football or Brock Purdy is how many games or what accomplishments are necessary before you're comfortable just going, he's good, and then walking out of the room. That's it. There's a period.
Right.
He's good, and then when are we eating? Instead of, but Debo and Christian and Kyle and defense and roster and this and that and the other. How long do we have to go before you're comfortable with he's good, past the beer nuts?
I wonder, and I think that it's going to take more time for him in terms of his career. And I'm looking at Joe Montana right now. His first 8 starts in the NFL, he was 2-6. And then the year that they go to the Super Bowl, he goes 13-3. They drafted 4 DBs in that same draft. They had 4 rookies in the secondary. Your defense was great. Joe Montana was terrific. He led the league for a second straight time in completion percentage. All of a sudden, Joe's winning percentage was better because the team was better.
Yes.
And all the rest of it all kind of coalesced into a championship team, and he wins the Super Bowl and all the rest of it. So Brock Purdy doesn't have to win the Super Bowl. I do think that he has to continue to stack these sort of winning performances in order for people to say, you know what? He's good. He's a good player, period. What's for dinner? I don't think that most people are there yet.
You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, always live on the free Odyssey app, Twitch, and YouTube, powered by First NorCal Credit Union. Thanks for all of the interaction on Twitch and YouTube. Comcast Business text line there as well, and the phones at 888-957-9570. The consultant is in Walnut Creek here on Willard and Dibs. Hey, consultant, what's up?
What's going on, guys? No, love the convo, and let's just, up the ante. I was saying that I don't think that we do enough comparisons to Joe Montana. So check this out. Think about this. When we talk about Brock Purdy and we give him too much credit for look at the team around him, let's just go one by one, or not one by one, but you get my point. Brock Purdy's got CMC. Well, Joe Montana had Roger Craig. Mm-hmm. We've got Ayuk and
Debo.
God, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name. Debo. Right over there, you got Dwight Clark and Freddie Solomon. You got an A+ defense in what Purdy had. You had an A+ defense with Ronnie Lott and team back when Joe Montana had it. You have Kyle Shanahan drawing up schemes. You had Bill Walsh drawing up schemes. Joe Montana had the highest paid roster and probably the best roster in the NFL during his reign. But he was amazing and he got credit for it. I have no idea why people are so hesitant for a quarterback that starts 11-0, even with all the great stuff that he's got around him. Great quarterbacks have had great teams, yet still get the credit. I think it's purely because of draft position and potentially what's going on in the NFL today that Purdy's not getting credit. But I think the comparisons can start now. Like Dib said, we're not saying he's as good yet, but man, 11-0 in the games that he's starting, 30-plus points a game. He's got the Joe Cool factor. He makes the right decisions. I mean, Purdy's got a lot to be excited about, and I think we should be talking about it.
Yeah, consultant, thanks. Listen, we in a way, we had this conversation, I think it was late last week, where I was talking about the fact that it's like Joe Montana goes down for time as the greatest of all time, and Purdy has nothing that Joe didn't have. It's all the same stuff. Great receivers, great tight end, great, in fact, I would say maybe even better offensive line. One of the greatest coaches, offensive play callers of all time, instituted a whole new system called the West Coast offense. Like, he had everything, and maybe it's because I was only 6-7 years old when he won his first Super Bowl and I just didn't know, or maybe it's because Twitter didn't exist and nobody had a cell phone. But I never remember hearing anyone go, well, Joe's good, but I mean, come on, who couldn't play well with all this around him? Nobody would have said that. I don't know that anybody's ever said that about a good quarterback. We don't do this to QBs. We don't. In fact, there are some right now that I would argue sort of the opposite conversation is happening. Let's take Justin Herbert for a second. So he's got 2 offensive minds on his sideline. I'm not going to call them great coaches, but 2. He's got one of the top running backs. He's got a very good receiving core.
Yeah, the running back's hurt, and one of his receivers has a torn ACL.
Right, but I'm talking about his career now.
Sure.
He's got Eckler.
Yeah.
And Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, and he's got defensive stars, the pass rush on the other end, Bosa, Khalil Mack. but he doesn't win nearly as many games. Yet, boy, the NFL is here to tell you that Justin Herbert's elite. He's elite.
Right.
Based on draft position and arm talent?
Yeah, arm talent for sure.
And I'm not saying he's not. I think he's great.
They got a questionable offensive line, and they've got a coach who can't really find his way to get out of his own way, so to speak. But I do think it's interesting about the Montana conversation because we don't look back and think, Joe, you won those Super Bowls, in spite of Joe Montana.
Right.
But then again, you do look at Montana, and he led the league, 5 times in completion percentage.
Yeah.
And so that's somewhere that Brock would need to get to. And, in terms of leading the league in touchdowns on 2 different occasions and other things that would make, and again, I'm not trying to say that Brock needs to do these things, and not that he needs to be compared to Joe Montana. He probably will never catch Joe Montana in terms of accomplishment and legacy.
Yes.
But, can you say that Brock Purdy shares some things that Joe Montana had? Absolutely.
Yeah, I get why it makes everybody uncomfortable, but to circle it back to Peter's question, it's a really fair one, which is just sort of why. Like, why? Why do we have
Why can't we give him credit?
Yeah, why do you have to attach something to each win, and how many wins is it going to take before that stops? I think is the question. Rob and San Bruno next up here on Willard and Dibs. Hey, Rob, what's up?
What's up, y'all? Let's we need to calm down with first of all, the comparisons to these all-time greats need to stop it. There's been a lot of quarterbacks who had the same skill set as Montana. That doesn't mean you're a great quarterback, and you're confusing a skill set with the teammates he has around him. Let's be real about it. This offense is based off the running game, whether that's Debo, whether that's CMC. In the short passing game, it's not offense based off quarterback play. It's always going to be based off the run game. You look at the run game, if the run game is doing bad, the passing game going to do bad. That's just how it goes with this offense. So let's stop all that. Let the season play out. I'm not saying Brock is bad. I'm not saying it at all. Let the season play out, but we're setting expectations so high up in the sky that when he fails, he's gonna be the worst things ever. And let me recall, I remember years ago, Jimmy G was top 10. Jimmy G was a top 10 quarterback. Let's stop that. Let's enjoy the season. Let him continue to grow. All this unwanted pressure about calling him Joe Montana. Let him be Chad Pennington first before we get to Joe Montana. That's all I'm saying.
Rob, respectfully, I think there's some interesting points in there, but I disagree with your main one. The main point being Brock Purdy is sort of a concoction of the run game. The run game is what makes the 49er offense go. Let's explore that for a second. I could argue the same thing is true for the Philadelphia Eagles, but I don't ever hear anybody be like, well, Jalen Hurts is good, but it's really about the run game. I don't hear that. Number 2, do you think a professional defense filled with millionaires who have their own coordinator solely focused on stopping the other team, do you think that if the other team does not present a problem in the passing game, that they would be beaten by the run game? In other words, your premise I find faulty because I don't think that exists. You can't have a good run game if you don't have the threat of the pass. They will just put everyone in the box and you will go nowhere. You'll go nowhere. However, what makes the 49ers so good, and this is on both sides, quite frankly, is that they're good everywhere. They're so balanced, maybe more so than any other Kyle Shanahan team. It's not to say the run game's not incredibly important, but you cannot effectively have a run game in the NFL if they're not thinking, dude, if we just stack and stop Christian McCaffrey, Brock's going to go right over our head and kill us.
Well, that's just about every team. And if you look around the NFL, I mean, every team has the threat of beating you over the top. No team is that one-dimensional.
The Jets don't. I don't agree.
And the Jets aren't really running the ball.
There's a lot of teams that don't have the ability to beat you up over the top. We were talking yesterday about all the ineffective QB play.
Right, but a lot of those teams don't have the same ability. And I think it's okay to say that the Niners are predicated on the run game, and it's not a disrespect to Brock Purdy because that's what the Niners do the best. They're number 3 in the league in running the ball right now behind the Dolphins and the Eagles, by the way. The Eagles are second in total yards. The Niners are third. And it's okay to say that the Niners are a run-first team without making that disrespectful to Brock Purdy.
Okay, so there's two different ways to package that. I find the way you just packaged it to say, okay, the offense may be predicated on the run.
Yes.
They're a run-first team. To then take it and say that's why Brock Purdy is able to function is where I find...
Yeah, I would not say it that way.
And I feel like that's where Rob was going. If I'm misinterpreting it, then that's on me.
You know what that would be then?
It would be a misinterpretation sensation.
Thank you.
I'm aware of that. But that's kind of how I took that. Now, I have no issue if you don't want to talk about Joe Montana and Brock Purdy in the same sentence.
That's fine. Yeah.
No one is ever saying that in terms of a historical resume context.
Right.
If you're saying that, I think it's absurd. I don't even know why we would go there yet. But what I'm trying to say is I will never, ever feel like quarterback play in the NFL can be diminished or explained. You can't go 11-0 and average 33 points a game and look at that and go, well, yeah, but that's because running back. I don't think it exists. This is the most important position in sports.
There have been examples of that,
for a reason.
but it's extremely rare.
Not
Mike Tomczak and the Trent Dilfer run, those were very rare examples where, Tomczak started his career 10-0, and they were winning because of the 1986 Chicago Bears defense, which was largely the 85 Bears D, and they were winning games 17-12.
Thank you. That's my point.
Yes.
You got to add in the point that the Niners are averaging 33 points a game.
Niners have run it 101 times this year, and they've passed it 91 times. So they are more of a run-heavy team than almost anybody in the NFL.
Sure, that's fine. But I'm not going to use the run game as a reason for Brock's success. Again,
I don't think you can diminish how good he is based on the run-pass mix.
All these things help. All of these things help. Any player. I just think it goes both ways.